Yeah, and that's one thing that we should mention too. Is like it's like we don't really are following a script, and
we should mention that.
Yeah, we're not following a script, and we're also just learning as we're going. So be gentle with us in the comments.
I'm the politician, right?
Mm-hmm. And I'm just the simple Midwestern housewife.
Okay, well, you can minimize yourself. She's also a very talented artist in many things.
No, I am a local transgender artist. And yeah, I mean, Paula and I just do videos. She's a very close friend of mine. And actually, that was a comment that a friend of mine who watched one of our videos made. Was like, you're too agreeable with Paula, and you just keep nodding, and disagreeing with everything that she says, and I was like,
that's just when she's on film. It's not like that normally.
But I told him, I said, you have to realize too that I'm a fan of Paula. You know what I mean? I even before I met you, I was a fan. I was a fan of you. And your politics. I remember reading about you online, and then you just showed up at my work one day, and I was like, oh my God, that's Paula Overby.
I remember that, yeah. At the art center or the Walker.
Yeah, and I was so nervous to go up and talk to her, but if I didn't, then I wouldn't be sitting here right now.
And that's what's unique about this format, right? I mean, politicians don't want to talk to people in an unscripted environment like this. They want to control the narrative. They want to control the media.
Yes.
They want to control the questions.
Yes.
I personally think that needs to end. We need to get honest communication and honest responses from our politicians.
Yes.
And be able to ask real questions.
Yes, they have to be transparent.
And I admit, I have a difficult time answering some questions. Some questions are extremely personal.
Yeah, I mean, I'm assuming
either
because
for them
when
or for me.
As a politician, you're in the in the public, and people you're getting so used to kind of relating to people on a political level, and they also want to know more about you too. And because of the way that politics are right now, we have identity politics. So being trans, it's very influential to your campaign to identify as such.
And of course, I don't know that I've announced it, but I am a trans woman as myself. So.
Oh, really?
Really? I should have told her.
All these years, Paula?
All these years. Yes, I was the first trans woman to run for U.S. Congress, actually.
Yes.
Back in 2014.
And that's how I found out about you, because I mean, if you have any sort of pulse and popularity online as a trans woman, most likely I've heard about you, because I've said in one of our last videos about how I think it's so important for women, for trans women specifically, to have opinions and to say them, and because we need more voices, from such a small community, and that's why I wanted to do these videos with you too, is because I want to be one of those voices too. Because when was the last time you seen a video with a trans Native American woman, having,
You don't see too many of those.
having input in anything.
I want to get you on my staff. You don't get too many trans Native American women on campaign staff either.
Absolutely, but at the same time, there's the other side to that is I'm very careful about, I don't want to be tokenized either.
Precisely.
Because you see that happening, especially in politics, is is tokenizing, Black people, and, using your supporters and to kind of push your political motivation.
Which, speaking of did you see in the news today where Kanye West is announcing him running for president?
Yes.
He's married to Kim Kardashian.
Kim Kardashian, yes.
He's so proud of the fact that she's a billionaire. He was immediately endorsed by Elon Musk.
Of course he was.
Another billionaire.
Yes.
Is this a token billionaire, would you say?
I mean, when it comes to Kanye West, that doesn't surprise me. I think it's more of an ego thing than anything. And I mean, like Kim Kardashian as well. Like, I mean, these are just like the mega rich, and that's kind of what I don't like that politics is turning into. Is like you must, have like, a certain digit to your financial worth to run for
office,
president.
yeah.
Yes.
And it touched our story as well, right? With Caitlyn Jenner. Mm-hmm. So, but that's not what we came to talk about, right?
No, it isn't.
We're talking about the political policy and process that's gotten to be such a sideshow. What we came to talk about was coronavirus. Mm-hmm. And,
and we need to make that disclaimer too.
And we should. You have your mask available. What we're doing, we're not social distance here. What we're doing is what some people are referring to as pod security, where this is particularly true, and I had this conversation with my daughter last week, particularly true with people that have roommates, right? Mm-hmm. So how do you ensure that your home, your domicile is secure, right? Mm-hmm. Particularly if you have one or two of your residents have to go out into high-risk environments.
Right.
Quite challenging, actually, it turns out. Mm-hmm. This is something that we do in our family, too. It's my home and her home are like safe space.
Yes.
Right?
Yes. And for the most part, we have been quarantining. And I mean, it's hard to do it 100%. And that's something that we could discuss, too, is having the privilege to work from home. Yep. And, having even the privilege to just order your groceries, you know what I mean? Things like that. Yeah. Like, I mean, not all of us, live that life.
And I think that's very hard to understand for people that have the privilege of being able to work from home and being able to quarantine, mm-hmm. What it's like to live in a household with 4 or maybe 5 roommates. Mm-hmm. They have 2 pods, right? So actually 4 people living in 2 different mm-hmm. homes. Where that gets extremely complicated.
Sure.
So she contacted me a couple weeks ago and wanted to let me know that they'd had a breach, she called it, right?
Wow.
Where someone in their pod, in their household, had a direct contact with someone who was infected with COVID-19.
Oh my God.
And so then it becomes a matter of, well, you've had this contact, how do you know if you've acquired the COVID? Mm-hmm. How do you know if you've spread it to your pod? Mm-hmm. How do you now again secure your environment? Mm-hmm. And so what they're doing is a rotational testing, right? Mm-hmm. Because there's still so much we don't know about this. We don't know what the incubation period is. We don't know how typical it is for people to be asymptomatic. Mm-hmm.
And I feel like the story keeps changing every single time. Like, there's new information that's coming out, and, at one point it's like, it's the most contagious thing ever, and then people are saying that, it's not as contagious, like, in the, outdoors, like, in the sunlight, in the heat. You're going to see it, spike again in the fall, but we're seeing it spike again right now. Particular in certain states, so.
But the fall. Go ahead.
No, I was gonna say, it's surging right now in Minnesota.
It is.
Yeah, okay. I mean I've been trying my best to keep up with it. Although I've been limiting the amount of news that I take in because for my mental health, I have to.
Definitely, I understand that. Yeah, mm-hmm. I think a lot of us understand that.
Mm-hmm. And I have a couple friends who work in the medical field, and they're not. I mean, it's surging according to us, where it was never really that bad in Minnesota, but compared to some states, like New York and Texas, Arizona, where my family's from. But like I said, I had a couple friends who work in the medical field, and they're saying that hospitals are filling up, but Minnesota is prepared for it. They and healthcare here, I think, is particularly they're more prepared.
More prepared. but I still think not nearly as prepared as it should be.
Mm-hmm.
And this is
like in regards
part
to
of the conversation that I think is really missing, is the lack of resilience in our healthcare system. There's a lot of blame about how we didn't ramp up for this, and we didn't get PPE out there, but the reality, in my experience working with healthcare, is that we just don't have the resiliency in our healthcare system. We've been closing hospitals for decades. This is particularly true in rural areas. They don't have immediate access to healthcare. They don't have, we don't have the same number of clinics that make healthcare accessible at a basic level. We're still not able to do adequate testing. I was talking earlier about my daughter's experience, right? And so I asked if one of the persons in her household was being tested, and yes, he'd had the test, and she said that test would be back next week. And I said, next week?
Wow.
It's like, how can you possibly do contact tracing and you can't even manage a household of 4 people with conditions like that. I wonder how they can even think about doing contact tracing at a broader level. Right?
I mean, I haven't been keeping up with testing and is it pretty reliable now? I feel like it should be if it's taking that long for the results to come back.
And this is the next level I go to, right? First, it's a lack of resilience in our healthcare system. Healthcare is what I work on most of the time. Just trying to get basic things like transparency and accountability, and even an audit of our health maintenance organizations. But the next level is just how political the whole discussion is. And what you were saying about testing, that's right from the beginning. First of all, there were a couple of narratives. One is flattening the curve. Remember that?
Yes.
Something we don't really hear too much about anymore. Then there was information about how deadly it is, right? It's like 5% or 6%. Now we're seeing that number down around what?
Well, I mean, I actually did the math myself because I took the numbers and did the very simple math. I think it was actually 0.087% is the death rate.
Yeah.
So 0.01%, which is like what? Is that 1 in 100?
It's getting down near the levels of a typical flu season. Right?
Which but in a way, like when you do the math and you see it actually alleviates a lot of my worry, because sometimes like I said, the reason why I stay away from the news is because it makes it feel like everyone's dying around you, and and if you consume too much of that and all of that negativity, it has an effect on your emotional well-being.
And that's a consequence that we're not talking about either, right? All the emotional impact, potential suicides, people that aren't getting the health care they need, even people not getting cancer treatments, right? None of that's part of the
trans
dialogue.
women not being able to have access to their hormones.
Not getting their hormones, yeah.
Surgeries are having to be delayed.
So none of that's part of the discussion, right? So there isn't an overall assessment of how people are being impacted. Certainly we hear about the economic impact, right? It's like, we're measuring life against billionaires against money. That's our society. We measure everything according to that standard. But it's just so politicized.
Yes.
And that's the confusion that people deal with. That's a major part of actually controlling the problem. Like, how do you get people cooperate with any type of social policy when it's so ambiguous and so political?
Right.
Tina Smith just today now is attacking the potential, or creating fears about the potential risks of a vaccine in the fall.
The potential risks? Like, what would the risk be?
Well, the narrative that she's creating is that the Trump administration is going to fast track a vaccine and it's not going to be safe to bolster his numbers in the election in November.
I don't know if I would take a vaccine if it was still kind of in this beta phase. I would be a little scared to do that.
But the point being, it's a political narrative, right? It's like creating fear about the potential of a vaccine because it's being used to manipulate an election.
Absolutely.
Right?
I mean, none of that surprises me.
That's not the way to create public policy, right? By creating fear, especially unrecognized fears and innuendo and suggestion and no facts.
Yeah.
No evidence, and that's part of the problem we're dealing with in terms of managing this pandemic in the United States, is that it's so politicized, we're not really getting accurate information. Like you said, I had to run the numbers myself.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's what I do, right?
And that's, but everyone should take it upon themselves to try and, sift through the BS, the drama, the fear mongering that we see, and try to get down to the nitty gritty. You know what I do? I actually look to outside sources to find out what's going on in America.
Yeah.
I actually look at a lot of British news. A lot of European news will cover what's going on here. I mean, there's no political motivation for them. So
I do that as well. I'm kind of a fan of Caitlin Johnson. You ever read her? She's from Australia.
No. Well, she's going to be on my radar now.
Well, she does all my work for me. I love it.
Yeah.
She talks about, our foreign policy, right, and military policy and our political process.
And she's Australian?
So she's Australian, yeah.
I love that.
I'll send you the link.
Okay.
Maybe check her out. It's probably maybe not the policy issues that you're interested in. But for me, as an opponent of our excessive military spending, she really delves into the sources and the references and really makes my job a lot easier.
Right. I also, I follow a lot of Native news too.
Who?
And Native news,
like
Indigenous news, First Nation news. I look at Canadian First Nations, like podcasts and online articles. I'm surprised at just the amount of Native news that's not integrated into mainstream news.
I can imagine.
Actually, the main thing I think that people are seeing is my tribe, Navajo Nation. Navajo Nation is in the spotlight right now because we're getting put through it with coronavirus.
Right.
And just like how you were talking about your family situation, I have a cousin who tested positive for COVID. He doesn't live on Navajo Nation, but he is in Phoenix. And one of the questions that I get from people is, why is it that Native American people are getting affected so much by coronavirus? And the reason for that is because there's a high rate of diabetes, there's a high rate of high blood pressure and obesity. And you can't blame them because they don't have access to proper, medical facilities. They don't go to see doctors, like we do. If we need something in a few days, it's a trek out to go to a hospital. And also they don't have access to healthy foods, so, and he's one of those that is at risk because he is obese. He does have diabetes and he does have high blood pressure. He's 29 years old.
And I'm glad to hear you making that point because I think you're right. I mentioned that earlier. That's the lack of resiliency in our healthcare system. That's a lack of access to meaningful healthcare facilities.
And it's because of coronavirus.
And we're not talking about it.
Absolutely. When we're seeing all the cracks in healthcare because of coronavirus that we probably wouldn't have seen otherwise.
Oh.
So.
And you can say that's a racial issue, and I suppose it is. But the solution is in our healthcare system, right? And healthcare justice, which is not biased by a person's race or history. That's universal healthcare, right?
Yes. And I mean, just because you have Navajo Nation is the size of a state. it's like the size of South Carolina. Actually,
okay.
it's a big tribe.
Big area.
You know, and we should
And
be
it's in
hearing
kind of in
more
the
about
desert
it.
Southwest,
You know what I mean?
right? It's like,
You know, and that's like Native news is American news, and you know, and just the same with you know tribes. It's like we have a young tribal president, and relatively young, but he is more likely to share things with the media that no other tribal president has done before him. And that's part of the reason why we're hearing so much about Navajo Nation, what's going on. And that's a good thing, too, because Navajo Nation has gotten a lot of support. They have a coronavirus fund that's doing really great right now.
so the response has been positive
Yes.
anyway. That's good.
International, you know, response, which is great.
You'll have to send me some links, actually. I do rely on people to educate me about important issues, and that certainly is one. I've been hearing, you know, more about it since Trump's rally at the National Monument at Mount Rushmore. That's kind of disgraceful too, but
Oh, yeah, I seen that. Well, bits of that.
you know what? We didn't have any bloopers out of that one either. But
I mean, they just come naturally, don't they?
they just come naturally.
It doesn't
yeah.
help that we're
There-
perfect and we
there's
have no bloopers.
We need a script writer for comedy.
Yeah.